Good morning. My name is Tracy Kassman. I'm your worship associate today, and we are the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo. Welcome, welcome. We're coming to you via Zoom, and so there's a few things you might want to know. First, we cannot hear or see you. We can't see, and you can't hear or see each other. You can see me, and you can see our special guest today, Reverend Kimberly Debus. You can also chat with each other all the way through the service. A big shout out today to Josh Disick, John Petroselli, our tech wizard of the day, Justin DeClean, Karen Streech, Bobby Withrow, Paul Zanoli, and all our music staff who help create our worship experiences every week. A special reminder that all RE classes will be returning January 3rd, including, are you ready? Graphic novels and coming of age. For more information, please check the weekly e-blast or your RE email. I also want to thank everyone who has made a pledge of financial commitment to the 2021 church year. Thanks to you, we have collected $371,000 in pledges. Let's get that last $29,000 in before the end of December so we can continue to provide you with the programming you expect and maintain our beloved church building in tip-top condition so it's ready for us when we return. If you haven't made a pledge yet, we would love to receive it soon. It's easy to pledge. Just email stewardship@buffalouu.org. That's stewardship@buffalouu.org.
My name is the Reverend Kimberly Debus, and I invite you now to breathe deeply as we hear these words from Gretchen Haley. There is still too much beauty in this world to give up on it yet, and it is always too soon to surrender to cynicism. Bring your doubt, your skepticism, your downright confusion, even your bitterness. But in the midst of all these, in the center, wrap your tender fingers around that bright thread of hope. Feel in your heart that still, steady hunger for something more. The vision we glimpse every day in the rising sun, the light that spreads across the face of the one we love, the look of knowing all there is to know, and still loving life, loving us just as it is, just as we are. For this hour we come to celebrate, to praise, to give thanks, to refuse to give up, and to steady ourselves, keepers of hope, brave builders of this still possible world. Come, let us worship together.
As Unitarian Universalists, when we gather, we light a chalice or light a candle in this regard. And so please join me as we say the words of our chalice lighting. We gather in loving community, inspiring one another to transform ourselves to create a more just and compassionate world.
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the place where you stand, to the outermost strand. Do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear all the dreams, all the days, all the sighs, all the sighs, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear?
Way up in northern Europe, wedged between Finland and Russia, there is a small country called Estonia. Now, there are only about 1 million people in Estonia. It is tiny, but it's also a beautiful country with lots of seaports and tons of rich rolling farmland. Maybe the first thing I learned about Estonians is how much they love music. It has been central to Estonian culture for centuries. And although Estonia is one of the smallest countries in the world, it nonetheless has one of the largest collections of folk songs. Estonians have historically used music to build their culture and community, but also as a political weapon. It is said that song was used in protest of the German invaders of the 13th century, and also in resistance to Russian occupation under Peter the Great in the 18th century. In 1869, Estonians started a song festival tradition called Laulupidu, where choirs from around the country come together every year to sing for days. Right now, nearly 30,000 people sing on stage at the same time, and over 100,000 people come every year to listen. Now, this continued even in times of war. During World War II, Estonia was occupied by the Nazis and then by the Soviets. Now, the Soviet Union was a group of 15 countries that were taken over by Russia to form what they thought of as a communist utopia, the USSR. Countries didn't go willingly, and those who spoke out against the Soviet Union were often banished to work camps or killed. Everyone had to speak in support of the Soviet Union. There was no such thing as free speech. And one of the things about the Soviets is that they understood that in order to build this union, everyone had to be on the same page culturally. So they wanted everyone to be Russian. And so all of the music was Russian, the official language was Russian, the food was Russian, school was all about Russia, and even new citizens were brought into these countries from Russia. Pretty much anything that was Estonian was removed and replaced with Russian things. Everything, even the music in Estonia, was Russian. Now, when it came to the song festival, all of the songs had to be in Russian and be in support of the Soviet Union. We might call this propaganda. And despite having people making sure everything was about Russia, in 1947, they let in a composition called Muisama on Minuarm, or Land of My Fathers, Land That I Love. Now, this was something special because the song was Estonian. It was composed by Gustav Ernesaks, and it used a famous Estonian poem by Lydia Koidula. The song slipped by the Soviet censors, and after 2 days of singing compulsory Russian songs glorifying Marx, Lenin, and Stalin, Estonians all sang Muisama and Minuarm in their native tongue, with a common and unspoken knowledge that it expressed hope for a free Estonia. And while the song was forbidden for a few years, they started slipping it in again, here and there. And on the 100th anniversary of the festival, everyone started singing it loudly. The choirs, the audience. The Soviets ordered a military band to play and drown out the singers. But 100 instruments is no match for over 100,000 people singing. The song was sung repeatedly in the face of these authorities, and there was nothing the Soviets could do but eventually invite the composer on stage to conduct the choir for yet another encore, and then pretend they intended to allow this all along. Louis Sama and Minoarm was never forbidden again. It gave people hope. They weren't sure they could be free, but maybe life could be a little better if they could remember who they were. Estonian, not Russian. In the early 1980s, when the Soviet Union was showing signs of crumbling, the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev put in some laws in place that allowed a bit more freedom, especially freedom of speech. But you know what happens when you give people freedom of speech? They use it. Soon people were speaking out, and more people were realizing they could be free, they could be liberated. They remembered they are Estonian first. They kept singing Muisa Ma and other songs about being Estonian. And they kept talking. When Soviet troops would threaten violence, which they did a lot, Estonians would gather to face the soldiers, and they would sing. And the soldiers would turn away, and blood would not be shed. In 1988, activist and artist Heinz Valk noticed this and coined the term singing revolution. He wrote, "We started a revolution with a smile and a song." And while it was hard, and the story really too complex for this short telling, eventually the Estonians were successful. And Estonia was the first of those 15 countries to declare its own independence. Singing their songs was the fuel for change. This was their power. This was something they shared from heart to heart, from family to family, from community to community. They have their liberation because of their singing. This non-violent way to assert who they were and claim their identity, their inherent worth, and their dignity. Muisa Ma is now one of their favorite national songs, and it is sung every year at Laulupidu.
This season, we're supporting the good work of a social justice organization that helps families experiencing homelessness. Family Promise of Western New York offers emergency housing and compassionate support. They create a community that wraps children and their families in hope. You can use PayPal by going to our website, www.buffalouu.org, and clicking on the Donate button. Or you can send a check by mail to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo, 695 Elmwood Avenue, Buffalo, New York, 14222. You can also arrange a regular automatic deposit with your bank. If yours is a gift to our Share the Plate ministry, please write share on the memo line, and it will be shared between Family Promise and the church operating budget. If yours is a gift, is a welcome gift to our congregation, please write Pledge 2020 on the memo line. Either way, please write UUCB on the important line, and we will do the bookkeeping. By sharing our blessings, we bring hope to the world.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Amen for the choir. A reading now from the Reverend Renee Rahutsky. We are the music. In a UU sanctuary, people sing together. Our first breath is followed by our first song. Lusty, loud, and primal, a solo that announces to the world, I have arrived. We are the music. As toddlers hearing our first reggae beat, we let our spines and hips bend and sway in response, as natural as the beat of our hearts. We are the music. The drone of the bass notes of the church organ, a vibration in our chests. Tense muscles relax. The breath deepens. We are the music. As we push the air from our bellies out through the chest and throat, Our changing expressions shape the sound. We are the music. As we sing together, voices blend to create a harmony, each voice enriched by its connection to the next. We are the music.
Octavia Butler writes that all you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Will you pray with me? For we need a prayer for all the stuck places in us, in our bodies, our hearts, our minds. We need a prayer for the stuck places in our families, in our world, for all those days when it feels like everything is caught in an endless loop of same and status quo and sterility. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. Those are words from thousands of years ago, the book of Ecclesiastes, but they ring true. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. Oh, Spirit of truth, this is our prayer. Help us to get over ourselves. Help us to release the restrictions that fear and grief and white supremacy have kept on our imaginations. Open us to the holy possibilities that are available to us in this moment and every moment. Connect us to the change that is everywhere, the change that is in the dirt, the change that is in the trees, the change that is in the rocks, in the river, that we barely manage to catch a glimpse of now, but we do. Connect us to our own power, the shifting plates of our hearts, the ancient dust that we contain and shed with each breath, each step, and tend still to the grief of all that has been lost. Tend to our grief and all we keep losing. The unfair choices, the no good options we find ourselves with. Give us courage. The courage to wail in anger so we can make space in our lungs for a new song, a lullaby for all that is being born in this great and living darkness. The shadows of surprise and surrender, all that readies in us and in the worthy dream of beloved community. To change, to be changed, to know it all is God. God is change. We give thanks for this. We call out with thanks for this. We sing out praise and gladness for this, that we can wake up to this world again, that we can wake up to its beauty, its possibility, that we can keep on getting into good trouble, necessary trouble, like the prophet John Lewis said. We praise and give thanks that we have the strength, and most of all that we have the company to keep moving forward, eyes open into the dawning day. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be. The revolution in Estonia was many things, born from decades of Soviet rule and before that Nazi occupation, and truly a centuries-old history of conquest and occupation. The revolution in the late 1980s was about claiming first and foremost their identity and their worth, their freedom from occupying forces, and more, true liberation from oppression. It is, as we heard in the story, best understood in terms of their music. Music, their Estonian songs, were the fuel that drove them to revolution. But let me be clear, the revolution in Estonia was not fueled by a bunch of new songs with new ideas. The revolution was fueled by hearing their old songs in a new way. For Estonia, Muisa Ma and their thousands of folk songs were a part of their cultural imaginary. Now, as I understand it, the cultural imaginary or social imaginary is not fiction. It is rather understood as a collection of stories and symbols and ideas that surround a people's concept of themselves and a particular identity. Cultural imaginaries aren't false. Rather, they inform how a people understand their collective identity. This is a remarkably common practice. We see cultural imaginaries built in Latino communities, LGBTQ communities, immigrant and refugee communities. The symbols and stories and mythos of our people. Even music and literature and dances and food and media, and they all create the cultural imaginary. So we can see from our story about the Estonian singing revolution, setting the Koidula poem in an inspiring choral composition reminded the people of the things that made them Estonian. And the song became embedded as a symbol of their cultural imaginary, which then helped them claim not just their cultural identity, but their very liberation. We Unitarian Universalists have our own cultural imaginary, built on the stories of John Murray and the shipwreck that led to the first Universalist sermon in America, the story of Henry David Thoreau and his 2 years in a cabin on Walden Pond, these legends that tell us who we are, true stories of true people, even if they're a little light on the facts. In religious movements, the cultural imaginary is built on story, sacred text, rituals and practices, and of course, songs. For modern Unitarian Universalists, our cultural imaginary is grounded in the song Spirit of Life, which, by the way, took longer to become our song than our story would suggest. But it's important to our identity, these songs we sing. They tell us who we are and what we believe. They give us insight, their insider knowledge, a shibboleth, if you will. A key, these are our people. And these are the things they believe. It's said that people don't speak their theology as much as they sing their theology. And we certainly sing ours in books collected decades ago. Now, here's the thing. If, as Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams asserts, revelation is not sealed and there's always more for us to know and experience, then what does it mean that we're getting stuck in music that is decades old? Is our theology stuck in 2005 or 1993? Well, we know that's not true. At the 2020 General Assembly, the Commission on Institutional Change revealed their report, Widening the Circle of Concern, in which they call for a shift in our collective theologies to liberation. Namely, what does it mean to view how we understand our principles and sources when we consider not just freedom from constraint and a fairly common reliance on self-reliance, but shift to considering those both in and outside our congregations and their collective liberation from poverty, bigotry, and oppression. When we change our view from how am I free from constraint to how are we liberated from oppression, we understand the power of Unitarian Universalists to really be about the tide rising all boats, to helping create a world where all of us are free, to actually being able to build the beloved community. When we change our view, we understand the power of Unitarian Universalism to affirm that none of us are free until all of us are free. That is liberation. And while there are a couple dozen songs in our hymnals marked freedom and none marked liberation, we know the liberation is there because we know that art changes when we are not looking at it. And so when we look again at some of these songs, we see the liberation and they're just begging us to lean into it. Let's take a song like Circle Round for Freedom, a freedom song written by Cantor Linda Hirschhorn. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Even a song that uses I language, a freedom song like Oh Freedom, which is a folk song from the post-emancipation American South, they suddenly aren't just about one person, but are about everyone praying for release. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. And note, this new lens isn't just about freedom songs. So many of our hymns speak to this call to liberation for all. Many of our hymns, wake now my senses, one more step, just as long as I have breath, and so many more, they call us to this work of liberating all. Now, this isn't to say that every one of our hymns can or should be seen through a liberative lens. And that means that there could be problems. And some of them aren't all fine anymore. Some of our hymns show us evidence of how the moral arc of the universe actually has been bending toward justice, even in the last 30 years. I first realized this when I took up a spiritual practice of singing our hymns, one a day, both books. Soon I was researching the hymn's origins, histories, learning more about language, usage, composers, and exploring the theologies. And over again, I bumped up on phrases like brothers and sisters and dark and light, and words like stand and run and walk, and themes about conquest and triumph and empire. And it's not surprising. Remember that the Gray hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, was first commissioned before the end of the Cold War and was only published in 1993. The members of the commission were told to approach expansively, and for them, it primarily meant theologies. More humanism, more of the new earth-centered traditions, and remember that they'd only recently gotten the sixth source and the seventh principle. It meant changing God language to be more inclusive and to make sure the hymns included women. And they were at the end of the Cold War, the end of apartheid, the end of nuclear proliferation, and we had just been at war in Iraq. So what was on our minds and the minds of our hymnal commission was peace and freedom. By the early 2000s, when the Teal hymnal Singing the Journey was published, you'd think things would have shifted, but again, we were at war again in Iraq. And so what was on our mind was peace and freedom. But since then, we have bent the moral arc toward justice a bit more, have drawn the circle of love a bit wider. We learned that gender is not binary. We learned about the harms of the doctrine of discovery. We explored ableist language, critical race theory, intersectionality, the toll of poverty. And with it, we have learned the power of language to change the world and minds and hearts. And so what this means is that there are in our hymns some difficult songs with language that is difficult to sing now. You see, art changes when we aren't looking at it, and sometimes it doesn't age well. For example, the hymn "We'll Build a Land" is for many about the beloved community, echoing the quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who quoted the book of Amos in the Hebrew Scriptures. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. And setting aside brothers and sisters, which is already exclusive, the Reverend Danielle DeBona, who is Native American, tells us that yes, you can sing it, but you have to think about me and how my people's lands were stolen in the name of God every time you do. So, is it a song of liberation? Can we sing it? Should we sing it? This is what the work calls us to, looking at our assumptions, our language, our music, all the elements of our Unitarian Universalist cultural imaginary, and deciding what speaks the Unitarian Universalist language we need most in order to truly love the hell out of this world. I mean, it just comes down to this. When we talk about widening the circle of concern in our world, in our denomination, in our congregations, in our personal lives, we have this amazing tool already at our disposal. The songs that affirm not just peace and freedom, but songs that affirm liberation. Songs that proclaim a call to justice, equity, and compassion. Songs that challenge us to change who we are and how we project ourselves into the world. Songs that inspire us to act. Songs that comfort and feed our souls for the long journey ahead. And yes, there will be new songs. Of course, we have some of them already. Songs like "We Shall Be Known," and "Where You Go, I Will Go," and "The Tide is Rising and So Are We." But even in the 2 books we collected 20, 30 years ago, these songs in our living tradition, the tradition we hold close to our hearts, we have so much of what we need already to draw the circle wide. And so let us sing a new way as we build a new way.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry, is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry, is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Join with me now in the words as we extinguish our chalice. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love.
In the words of Barbara Pescon, because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Let us go remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love mightily, to bow to the mystery. Go in love, go in joy, go in peace.